Hello and welcome to the Leadership Matters podcast, the podcast for people passionate about leadership and organisational performance, offering up insight and inspiration from peers who have great experience to share from developing leaders in some of the world's leading organisations. I'm your host, Andy Dent of the Oxford Group, and here at the Oxford Group we've had the privilege of developing leaders at organisations across the globe for over 35 years. We fundamentally believe that leadership matters. As leaders, what we choose to focus on and how we show up on a day-to-day basis really does shape organisations and the people experience. So if you're interested in learning more about leadership development, then this is definitely the podcast for you. We'd love you to subscribe or hit like today to fuel us on the journey to more episodes. So without further ado, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome everybody to today's Leadership Matters podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have Ross Stevenson, Chief Learning Strategist and founder at Steal These Thoughts with us today. Steal These Thoughts are a learning technology consultancy and research house that Ross was the founder of. And I stumbled across Ross's work probably a good couple of years ago now on LinkedIn. And since we've been in contact for a couple of bits to help us out at the Oxford Group, and he's delivered a great session to our team. So I'm really looking forward to actually learning a bit more about Ross's journey, because we haven't got into that, and sharing that with you all. So welcome, Ross, to today.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And I guess today is a bit of a hybrid, because we've got our usual format, which talks us through where you've kind of come from, but it's also the AI special in a way. As what I think of you as like an AI guru, Ross. So as specifically an AI guru for people in L&D as well. So I think this is going to be super useful for our listeners. So just to kick us off, the first thing it'd be great is maybe tell us about your journey. You know, how did you get into L&D, and how did you then get from L&D into what you do now?
Yeah, all very good questions. So I suppose the highlights of that are I've been in HR/L&D for about 17 years, pretty much. I started off in a kind of operational 360 HR role, like most people. So you kind of do a bit of HR, you do a bit of L&D, you do a bit of HR partnering, all this kind of stuff. And then about, oh God, I feel old when I say this now, probably about 10 to 12 years ago, I basically went kind of specialized more into L&D. So I went to go join Tesco Group, which most people will know as a huge organization, 300,000 people worldwide. And I had an opportunity basically to move from the 360 HR model over to L&D. That all happened, to be quite frank, because as a consumer, I was sick of really bad L&D experiences and training by e-learning or PowerPoint. And my background actually was in technology. So my education had been to train to be a software engineer. I'd always been building computers, building architecture, coding. And I was kind of like, at that point, being much younger and probably much more egotistical, I was like, I think I could probably do something in this space which was much more technology focused. And I got very lucky where someone at the point in the Tesco business, for whatever reason, the stars aligned and they were looking for someone who was a bit younger, knew a lot more about technology. I suppose the words millennial or digital native were very popular at that time. You know, oh, you know about YouTube, so maybe you can come and do this stuff. So that was kind of really how I got started. I kind of fell into the space a little bit, but had the intention of, I'm really good at tech, I'm really interested in tech, and I think there is a space in the L&D arena where they're not so good with tech, especially in the HR part as well. So I think I have an advantage there, and I could probably use that to do something in my career. So that led me basically into having, like most people, many hybrid roles in the L&D space, usually purely focused on how do we build technology products in the learning space? How do we implement them? How do they become successful? Particularly at Tesco, that led me to a 7-year journey of building a in-house product, launching that product kind of internationally, making sure that was successful from a learning tech space. And then there was little bits in there around L&D practices, leadership, all the bits that L&D people do. And then post that, I then went to go work for at the time, a scale-up organization before they IPO'd, specifically in the technology space. And I worked with them to build, basically never had an L&D team before. So I was given a blank slate to say, do what you want.
Nice.
Here's a bunch of cash. I thought that was quite interesting. So I decided to run off and make my, shall I say, digital learning dreams come true. And I suppose build what I looked at as a bit of an experiment of how do we really marry together technology and modern learning for a leading tech company. And I spent 4 years doing that as their kind of head of L&D there. And then in between that, I've spent some time as, before I do what I do now as my kind of, shall we call it, self-employed life, I went to go work as a learning strategist for an AI company before ChatGPT kind of emerged. So that wasn't on purpose. It was actually because being in the learning tech space for so long, I've always had offers from vendors, as in, you know, would you be interested to come and work with us of our technology to help us grow that, understand the consumer? I've always said I wouldn't do it. For whatever reason, I got older and I said, oh, that might be interesting. Maybe I'll go and do that for a while. And I did. So I did it for about 6 months. And it was really interesting to kind of see behind the scenes of how do learning technology companies work, specifically in the AI space. And then on the side of that, of course, I've had this thing, which we've spoken about, Still These Thoughts, as a side project, like most people do, because that's very hip to say, for 7 years. And I kind of had lots of data to say, you could probably go and do something with this thing, like full time. But I was kind of like, never really looked at it as that. It was always like, I enjoy doing this. I write a newsletter. For some reason, thousands of people now read that newsletter and get a lot from it, which is great. But I never looked at it as a business. And then I suppose about 6 months into working with this company, I figured out quite quickly 80% of their customers knew who I was from the newsletter, not because of the company. So very quickly, well, I got to this state where I was like, well, this is weird, because these are pretty big companies across America and Europe. And because it kept happening, I was like, all right, I think if there is a moment like you see in the films, this is probably that moment where I should probably do something. So yeah, I did the kind of, if you want to call it, the corporate startup game for 16 years. And then I've now moved into a space where I basically take all of that insight and the knowledge from the technology work that I've done specifically in L&D, and then implement that with a variety of different companies. Obviously work with yourself and work with loads of organizations across Europe and America and the UK. So that's kind of how I got into it. But I think underpinned of that, should I say, is that I've always had a natural curiosity, and we're all programmed as humans to learn. So I just got lucky in finding the thing I was good at and the ability to be paid for the thing I was good at in the career game, if you want to call it that. So it kind of aligned for me.
And almost you saw the future as well, in a way, because when I look at L&D teams nowadays, the L&D pros that we work with are more and more focused on automations, AI, how you can digitize, you know, all that
100%.
alongside lots of other stuff as well. But it feels like that's so much more prominent than it ever was. And it would be good to get into whether that's a good thing or a bad thing as we kind of travel through the conversation. So we got a couple more questions just to get to know you really more in the kind of context of learning and leadership development, and then we'll jump into the AI stuff. So obviously you're out and about seeing lots of organizations and working with lots of leaders and people in L&D. What are you seeing is the biggest challenge for leaders, you know, operational leaders that are out there leading organizations, that they're facing right now?
Yes, interesting. If you asked me 18 months ago, I would tell you culture and significant training for them to be a good leader. I don't think those things have changed entirely from what I see. I think what has changed, and obviously with this conversation, is AI has really created a, shall we say, like a rift in what's happening at organizations now. And I think what I've noticed happening is that leaders are facing the difficulty of, we live in an increasingly digital world. Where is the place of people's skills and humans in that digital world to work alongside these tools? And that's not just from an AI perspective, but more just from the kind of grandiose access that companies have to technology now. And I find a lot of leaders I'm having conversations with them are, what we're really struggling with is how do we help people develop their human skills, but also embrace forms of
Mm.
technology to enhance what we do. I think AI on top of that has made that a bigger focus because I spend a lot of time with leaders and many companies going, I feel like I should be doing something with this. I don't know what I should be doing, but also I want to make sure that my team is really skilled as people so they are able to have a long career and have the right skills to still support the business. So I think as some it would really be it's that people element of human skills and how do we, I mean, people call it soft skills, but I call it human skills. How do we get better at that, especially considering so much of the business world is now moving to enhancement and automation with technology. And like I say, with that technology bit is how can they as leaders be well informed on latest technology to make use of it, but also just navigate it in their own careers. And I think in the moment we speak, I see a lot of apprehension and maybe even a little bit of fear. A lot of leaders that I talk to where they kind of feel like it's just getting away from them a little bit,
Mm.
and it's hard to keep in that realm. So yeah, those are my kind of assessments that I see.
Yeah, that chimes a lot with some of the stuff we're seeing as well. So thanks for sharing that perspective. Um, so not necessarily digital, but if you had to take
Mm,
like proper books, Ross. So
mm.
for example, you
Yeah,
get stranded on a desert island and
yeah.
someone could launch a few books your way. What books would they be? Leadership books, rather, I should
Oh,
say.
yeah. I mean, from a leadership perspective, so there's a couple of things. So I mean, this is going to be a bit of an obvious one, but I read Alex Ferguson's book called Leading. I think it
Mm,
came out about 10, 12 years ago. And it's stereotypical for a man to say about a sports coach of a huge football team. But as someone who's half Scottish and grown up watching Alex Ferguson and Manchester United, and he actually comes from the same area in Scotland that my Scottish family do. I've always found him interesting. So when I read his book Leading, and I thought, look, who's better to learn from than a guy who's been at the highest level for 25 years? And yeah, I would take that book because I think there's an incredible amount there, not necessarily football, but on human leadership. And I think the way
mm,
he approaches human leadership and some great things that he talks about, always being the student, always reading, always watching, always listening, and the way he deals with that one-to-one management of people was something that greatly impacted me and still does today when I still think about it now,
mm,
to be honest.
mm.
So that would be one of them. Another one would be a book called No Hard Feelings, which is
Ooh.
by Liz Fosslin and Molly West Duffy, I think Duffy, yeah, which is basically about emotions at work and how they help you succeed. So I think with
Ah,
emotional intelligence, it wasn't when I first started my career, like 15, 16 years ago, people weren't talking about their emotions or emotional intelligence or how do emotions help us succeed. But I think if we look at it, I always hated the phrase leave your emotions at the door when you come to work because that's impossible. It's our human form of data. It's how we interact with the world. It's how we interact with people. And I think that book is great because it has a lot of interaction with big tech companies, which is the world that I sit in terms of how they lead, and also how, again, the one-to-one management. And I think the other book that comes to mind is the Trillion Dollar Coach. Um, I can't remember the author's name. It's Bill something, but you'll find it because it's a very, very popular book. It's by a coach who worked with the biggest companies in all of Silicon Valley, big tech. So he was the coach for all of Google's board. He was the coach of Steve Jobs. He coached Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook when it started. So, Sheryl Sandberg,
mm,
all the people at Yahoo. Although he was in the background, he was responsible for a great deal of coaching, probably some of the people we look at as the most successful leaders in the tech space at the biggest companies. And that book is just full of golden stories on how to lead, how to build teams, how to build organizations. So yeah, I think a leadership book I would take for sure.
Happy days, some good ones in there. And the No Hard Feelings, Liz and Molly, are they the ones that you see their kind of cartoons all over?
They are,
social media?
yeah. So a lot of people don't know
Really
they
cool.
have a series of books. So like the cartoons come from the books. So
Right, okay.
but yeah, they write the books too. But I said the No Hard Feelings one. If you like all the cartoons, they're filled in the book as well. And I just think from a perspective of stories and case studies, it's one of the better ones I've read. What I will say is all these books that I've mentioned they sit in the category for me of they should be books. I think sometimes we read books, and I definitely read books where it could have been a blog or it could have been like a one pager. Whereas I think these books, there's a very cohesive framework of taking you from A to Z and then saying, it's not just let me pour theory on you. It's like, especially the $1 trillion coach one as well. Like, let me show you, like, here are the frameworks. Here's how we did it. And then here's how you can use it. So probably my old team can also figure out some of the stuff I've now used on them from various books over the years.
Yeah, we've all got our go-tos, haven't we? So that's great. Thank you for sharing those. Some new ones for me. So that's all good. And in terms of what you think leaders should engage with, either watch or listen, there's loads of podcasts out there, TED Talks and all that type of stuff. What's your kind of recommendations specifically for leaders?
Yeah, I mean, specifically for leaders, the one I would say, which I suppose could be controversial, is so I listen to a chap quite a lot called Professor Scott Galloway, and he is a teacher at NY Stone over in America, and he has written two lovely books. One called The Algebra of Happiness, which I believe is a must read for any human, and also The Algebra of Wealth. So the reason why I recommend him, because he has a number of podcasts where he interviews business leaders all over the world. But his background is that he's got a very interesting background. I won't go through all of it because it will spoil it for people. But the gist of it is he's built a bunch of startup companies, been very successful, lost it all multiple times from different recessions, and gained it again. And he now fundamentally works on trying to help younger people get great education at different education establishments. And he works with a lot of business leaders in that field. So he has two. He has the Prof G Show and also Prof G Markets, which are all under kind of his brand. But basically what they do is they go speak to leaders of the world today, but they also speak to emerging leaders. So they have this really interesting part of their podcast where they will go and speak to people who are in startups and scale ups, who are building businesses, and they'll say, who do you learn from? What are you learning? What are you doing? What can people get from that? So they have two sides of the coin. So it's not just these, like we usually look at, established people who are 50, 60 years older, but also younger people. And I think a cheeky one in that, and I've only just discovered recently, is this podcast called, I think it was Acquired. Is it Acquired? I don't know. But basically, I'll confirm that if it is Acquired. But they do something similar. So they go and interview people who have basically been there and done that. So they've got like Charlie Munger from Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett. They've got people working at big companies like at EY and P&G. And they basically do this really interesting, not just an interview format, but they actually build a case study. And they'll do a case study of the individual without the individual being there. And they'll break that down over an hour to say, how do they get to where they got to? What were their leadership principles? What were the things they learned? Where did they get their education? So I'll confirm on that name. It might be Acquired or Acquisition. This is me hastily. People can't see me, but looking at my, it is Acquired. So it's called Every Company Has a Story. Acquired, but they've got loads of people on this. Charlie Munger, people at Costco, Nike, Porsche, Uber, absolutely loads of people. And I think if you are a real leader, business buff, and you like the detail, their case studies are in depth. You're talking 1 to 2 hours, and they really do prep. So it's really, really deep.
Great, that sounds awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that. That gives us some wisdom to start with, and now we're going to shift gears into the AI space. So keen to pick your brains on all things AI. So you obviously do a lot of work for a lot of organizations, specifically with that kind of AI learning tech hat on. What are the things that people are asking for at the moment? What's the trends that you're seeing that organizations are bringing you in for?
Yeah, so I think interestingly, the trends are people are actually, I suppose, crying for help more than asking me for stuff, because I think and I understand that, because at the moment in time, it can seem from an outsider's perspective incredibly complex and confusing because of social media, which most of us interact with, does make it seem like it's some kind of magic, which I will say it is not. I think actually when you get to it, it can be very simple and beneficial. So what I generally find of organizations is it's more about saying, look, we're curious, like we can see this as an internet moment, and just like with the internet moment, no one really knows where it's going, how to harness that power. So learning from the lessons of history, people are basically saying we would love to learn more about it. So with most organizations, what I am doing is, if we were to kind of build out a scaling chart, I would say most organizations are what I look at as a hobbyist level, and they've kind of messed around. They've heard of ChatGPT, which is kind of the poster boy for the generative AI movement. And then they're saying, how can I understand this more? And how could we use this? And, specifically, I do work with L&D teams, but I find myself more and more now that once the L&D team comes in, the whole organization goes, we want to learn more about that too. So it ends up being, which is nice, it's a beautiful thing where it kind of amplifies and more people want to get involved. So at the moment, it's more educating. It's more me saying, well, this is what we mean by AI. This is what we mean by generative AI. These are how these tools work. And depending upon your industry, here's 5 to 6 ways it can be really useful for you. And I would say 9 times out of 10, my conversations, that's where people are. They're in the land of, I don't know, but I'd like to know. And I'm curious. And that doesn't surprise me, to be honest, because we're still very early in this. And I don't think anyone is late to the party. So yeah, it's very much around education, but I think that's the right thing, is building the fundamentals and then intelligently scaling from that to then make use. Because what you don't want to do is what I've seen in my industry before, is go and buy a bunch of tools and then try and find a problem for the tool to solve. You want to fall in love with the problem first and then look at what are the correct tools to do that. And people might be surprised when I say it, but AI is not always going to be the solution to those problems, just because it's very trendy and sexy at the moment in time. So yeah, that is that's the majority of what I hear from people and what I get from people.
So I suppose for me that there's something in like a myth busting, I guess, that I'd be keen to get your thoughts on, because I hear AI as this like lazy catch-all term for anything related to technology, and it's far probably more nuanced than that. And I'm by no means an expert, and you've helped me to understand some of that. But you've got automation, which has been around for years and years.
Yes.
Then you've got now ChatGPTs and the large language models and all. Could you just kind of bust a few myths of what it is and what it isn't,
of course,
just at a really high level for people?
I mean, look, marketing teams have hijacked this term, right? And I think it's quite poignant, because I actually did post something on LinkedIn today saying, calling your tool AI powered is no longer an advantage, because it feels like, I mean, it's crazy. I feel like my coffee is AI powered at the moment. Like, it's mad.
Absolutely.
I was at the cinema as well. I went to go see the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, and I couldn't believe it. Like, every advert was about AI. Even KFC was about AI, and I was like, I don't understand what's happening in this world. But anyway, so it's kind of gone crazy, where I'm just like, I have to laugh at it, otherwise you would cry. But in terms of demystifying it, this is how it goes. So artificial intelligence has been around for 66 years. So it was coined all the way back in the 50s at a conference in Dartmouth in America. So AI itself is not new at all. It's actually been in the background from a lot of the tech we've been using. So we all use social media, algorithms there. They're powered partly by AI. We've all been using Netflix, which has got recommendation systems. So you say, I like this show. Netflix's machine learning algorithm goes, oh, you love this show, I'm going to give you 20 more of this show. So for a lot of us, that's how we've interacted with AI. And if we imagine artificial intelligence, it's like a top of a tree, and it's got like 60 or 70 branches beneath it, which are subspecies of artificial intelligence. Then for the chat GPTs of this world, they are part of a family called machine learning. So if we imagine them on a separate branch, and then you have generative AI as part of machine learning. So machine learning is what it says on the tin. It's machines that learn. And then generative AI sits in that family. The term generative just means to generate new content. And how that works is that if you take a chat GPT is basically a database. So it's been trained on the words data. You use a prompt as a human to instruct that database. So I don't know why the word became prompt, because basically it's just an instruction. You are just talking to a database and saying, hey, database, I would like to find out about X, Y, and Z. And then ChatGPT will then pump out new content, which is either an image, a video, text, whatever it is. That's what it's designed to do. And then a large language model is part of generative AI. So in generative AI, you have different components. So you have image creators, you have large language models, and a large language model is what the industry term for a ChatGPT, a Microsoft Copilot, a Claude. So all that means is that you are conversing with a model. It has got conversational capabilities. So in a kind of nutshell, that is it really. That's all you need to know, is that a ChatGPT is a huge database. It has training data. You are just talking to that training data and any other sources that it brings in from the internet to help you get an answer. And that's pretty much it, to be honest. There's nothing else outside of that.
And if I know probably people at different stages, even in our organization, of like giving it a go and confidence and where do you start, and then there's the whole organizational policies around what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do, etc. What would your advice be to people that just want to learn a little bit more, or just give it a go? Just because sometimes you can't really you can't get a feel for it until you've actually you got in and done some of those prompts. Where would you start? Any tools you'd advise?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would do, honestly, is to just go to I'm no way obviously affiliated with OpenAI, but they have a free tool in ChatGPT. It is the best free tool on the market to allow you to do a lot of stuff. And I would just go and create an account.
Okay.
Go have a mess around. There's stuff from people like me. There's stuff on YouTube. I mean, you can't miss it, to be fair. You can go and pick up a prompt, or you can just play around with it. You can basically just say, what are some things that I'm doing? Maybe I can ask ChatGPT about this. Maybe I can ask it to help me with a little bit of research, and just play. And this is what I say to people all the time, because people ask me, like, how do you know about all this stuff? It's like, there's no secret. There's no hack. Like, one day someone showed me ChatGPT free before it became ChatGPT. It was just GPT free, and it had this god awful interface that no one would have used before it became ChatGPT. And I saw it and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And I just played with it. Like, I didn't go to a course. I didn't, sit there and go and speak to the creator of generative AI. Like, I just experimented. I then followed my curiosity, read a few books, spoke to a few people who are machine learning engineers, asked a few questions, and then continued to experiment. And I kind of still just do that to this day. So all the videos that people see, they're not expertly done. They're genuinely me just, here's a new feature. Let's spend half hour exploring that new feature, and then pull out the bits that would be most interesting to people, and then continue to experiment with that. So it's not a sexy answer that people might want. Like, there is no one course to rule them all, or one resource. Most of it is just experimenting in getting a tool, using some tasks. What I don't recommend you do is look at these things where it's like, you need to know these 500 AI tools. You don't, like, at all. Like, 1 to 2 is absolutely fine. I would say one that is very generalistic, like a ChatGPT or a Copilot or a Claude. And it may be, depend upon your industry, something specific for your industry. But I think at the moment, the only industry that has, I would say, strong specific industry tools is in marketing, with kind of video creation, copywriting. I've yet to see something, specifically in our industry, and specifically in the leadership piece. And I know people have tried to pitch me stuff, but I've not seen anything where I think that is worth people's time to explore. So my thing is experimentation, curiosity, and you will get a lot more out of that than reading stuff online, which is either fear mongering or telling you that AI is our new god and we must worship it at all costs. So
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Okay. So what about for HR and L&D? What do you think the AI game changers are or could be in the future?
So I think there's two levels to that. There's operationally as working as individuals in that industry, and there's also then looking at what it gives the audience of those two teams. So I tackle the first one from a HR and L&D as a professional. I think like most individuals, what it can open up to you is streamlining both time with tasks and also doing that at a higher quality output. So if you want to see a good study on this, BCG and Harvard basically did a study together where they took 800 BCG consultants and they had one with just humans doing a task and one with humans and ChatGPT. And what they found is the groups that were the majority that had ChatGPT and humans were able to complete tasks 20% faster and at a 40% higher quality. And I thought that was quite interesting. So for most people, there is a good performance gain. So from a HR and L&D perspective, I think about tasks like if we take a HR person consistently inundated with emails, consistently on meetings where they're having to remember a billion different points that happened. And although it's what I would call boring and basic uses of generative AI, for an individual like that, if you've got 10 meetings a day and you need summarizations, having a very simple generative AI meeting agent with you or assistant, sorry, that can take all that information, that can digest it and then give out key points is going to save you a lot of time. And for a lot of people, that's great. You know, it doesn't have to be. I think people in this world where it's like, oh, I have to be using generative AI for something huge. But if I could say to you now, I can give you 5 hours of your time back to go and spend with your children or go and spend, you know, doing more human stuff at work. You probably bite my arm off for that because you've got something that would do that. And as an example of the meeting one, the reason why I say that is it's a free tool called read.ai that it's not in this meeting, but it joins all of my other meetings and it takes notes for me. And what it does is it comes back to me and it basically says, right, here's your conversation with so-and-so. Here are the key actions that you spoke about. And it gives them to me and it gives them to the recipient. And then it keeps me accountable because it gives me an overall view and I don't have to do anything. So that's done. So imagine if I had 10 meetings a day and that's done for me automatically and it's sent to me and it's sent to the recipient. That's probably saved me having to do work from about 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. at night with that. So for me, that's a huge gain, and vice versa with the HR element. If we take, you know, I know a lot of HR teams, I've worked with them over the years where 80% of the inbound queries they get are generally solvable by the user themselves. If they went to go search on a SharePoint somewhere or something, you know, they're usually questions like, how much holiday do I get for this? What's my notice period? You know, really basic stuff, but they take up so much time for an individual and they might get 20 to 30 of these requests a day. Especially, you know, when I was at Tesco, I was working with people that were getting 50 of these requests a day. Same thing, day in, day out. What you can do is basically say you can have a very simple AI assistant built on a chat GPT that sits there as the first layer interface that then says, okay, so before you go to the human, can AI help you? And it can, in the fact that you can plug it in to like the 20 most common questions you know people ask and then get it to give those answers to the individual. And the reason why I mention that is because I've done some of that work with HR teams and we've seen huge gains in the fact that for some people, for some of the teams, it's cut the inbound by 60% because a very generic question has been answered. And what would have happened is that it would have sat in an inbox. It would have been a part of 100 emails that got reviewed on a Friday in a lost day. So for a HR perspective, there's that. For an L&D perspective, again, you can do the same stuff, emails, meeting summarizations. You can use assistants to deal with queries, which I always think is quite interesting. But you can also use it as part of your design process. So I mean, when I came and spoke with your team, one of the things that always resonates with people is how do we use these tools as a thought partner? So I think at the moment, too many people use it for content creation because they think that's the only use case. But actually what's really good This definitely from an L&D perspective, and definitely from a leadership perspective. If you're, if you're building leadership workshops or you want a different point of view on something, you can actually put those questions into ChatGPT, use its ability to connect to the internet to see what are other companies doing, what are other things and case studies that I can look at. And you can partner with it in that collaborative perspective, just to ask questions, just to get different points of view. And I think that's greatly underused. And again, that may be the thing that stops you staring at a blank screen for a couple of hours, that saves that. So I think although, people like to talk about as I say, the big, trendy, sexy things that it can do, for 90% of people, it's the boring and basic. And I see that reflected in data. So there's a report from BCG that just came out last month that reflects this same thing, that most people, when they're using these tools, is to save time on the mundane tasks that take up too much time. Asana have done the same thing. They spoke to 5,000 of their clients with obviously thousands of employees each. They found the same thing. People on average were saving 8 hours a week because they were using these tools for summarizations, for emails and stuff. And, that's a good thing if we're able to do that and able to free up time. Fantastic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I've used it in a couple of ways that you've mentioned there. That thought partner thing that you talked to us and the team about was something that really resonated, and I've tested a few of those things out. And yet sometimes, like as consultants, we often are working on our own at home, from our home offices.
Yeah, exactly.
And you haven't got those people around you to bounce off. So I kind of been using ChatGPT as that thought partner. Like, I've put this together for X client.
Yeah.
What have I missed? What's the research
100%.
saying? Is there a case study that lands with this? And some of it comes out with some gold dust, some of it doesn't. And actually, I always find it's not about the first prompt. It's about the fifth or sixth prompt.
100%.
Once you've got it into a dialogue, you're like, okay, right, now I'm getting somewhere. So yeah, just that simple thought of think of it as a thought partner has made quite a big difference.
Yeah. And I think to build on that point very quickly is, and you brought it up quite nicely about that conversational element where you continue to chat with it. I think what we're having to do as a society is we have spent 30 years using Google to navigate the internet. So Google search is a very different behavioral process. It is, you enter some keywords and you're given a list of information, and then you as a human pick the list. That is not what these tools are. They're conversational tools. So by going in and treating it like Google and just using one sentence or a couple of words, you're not going to get the benefit. And it is all in the conversation. So the more you converse, the more you might be surprised actually about what some of these things can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. So obviously there's lots of upside, and some of that simple stuff you shared gives a big time benefit, big time gain potentially for people, as well as lots of other things. But what are the risks that organizations or leaders need, in the L&D space, need to be thinking about? Anything that you would advise people to think about?
100%. Look, there is, let me be frank, there's many risks. Definitely many risks with this technology, and especially emerging technology. So one of them, which we look at, I suppose, as a controllable, if I can call it that, is the right education. So I can definitely say what I see happen too often, and the reason why I see so many issues and leaks from data or whatever, is because companies are not providing upskilling on these tools. It's like basically saying to a 5-year-old child, here's a Ferrari, go and figure out what to do with it. And it's a very dangerous game to play. Very, very dangerous. So I see it too often now where I'm like, you are giving everyone access to a candy store and you're not kind of overviewing it. And this is where the issues emerge from. So my kind of output from that would be invest in upskilling. It doesn't matter how you do it. If you build it internally, if you get it externally, there's case studies online, like AstraZeneca, in my opinion, is doing a pretty good job from an L&D perspective and building their own internal academy around it. I'm sure there is more. I am working with companies in that space. I think the best thing you can do as an organization, even if you're not using the tools right now, the next 12 months, you need to be building in the fundamentals so everyone understands how this stuff works, because you may not have the tools, but I can guarantee you people are bringing their own AI to work on their phone and they're using it. And you're in a better position if you just say, look, we're all adults. We know you're probably using it. So let's talk about how we can use it intelligently, where it A, benefits you, but B, protects the company. And I think you will avoid a lot of headaches if you just spend time doing that. So that would be my first one. The second one is really understanding how the technology works. And this is what I'm probably about to say is not as well known unless you're in the tech space, but I'll explain it as non-techie as possible with an example so we can understand how this works. So generative AI itself is what we call a probabilistic technology. So in many ways, it is like a probability engine. What is not happening is that ChatGPT is not learning from you. It's not got some supervised learning technique where it is, every time you give it something, it's learning from you. It has training data, and that training data is what it uses to interact with you. The problem with that is that if we look at the systems we're used to dealing with, like a Google, that is in the tech space what we call a deterministic system. So it works on fact, it works on information that actually exists. So when you go to Google and say, I want to fly from London to Berlin, if you enter that 20 times, you would get the same countries, the same airline name, the same time. Wouldn't change. It's factual. The information's there. If you ask ChatGPT, the name of the country might change. The name of the airline might change. The date might change. The universe might change. I don't know sometimes. It depends where it goes. The reason why that happens is that is not a bug. That is a feature. So that's what makes it great, but it's also its weakness. And that's why marketers and social media people love it, because its purpose is to generate new content at all costs for the user. Its priority is not to base that in fact. It's not to say this is fact. Its basis is to say, I need to please my human user. So if I can't find an answer, I will create an answer from my training data. That's where the problem lies. And that's what I would want more people to understand, especially in our arena, because if you're a leader, if you're in HR, if you're in L&D, we deal with incredibly sensitive topics and sensitive conversations. So to rely on a tool on its own without any human intervention or human in the loop, which has the ability to hallucinate, to make up information and be confident in lying, is very dangerous. I share this because I think the products we make, a lot of that is what we do, right? It's very sensitive stuff. So when we unleash these things, we have to be mindful of, you can't control that. You cannot 100% control. You can do all the prompting in the world. You cannot control the nature of how it's built to not make up information. So you have to decide intelligently, when is it the right time to use this, which is probably great operationally, but when is the wrong time to use it, where you're going to build a product where it controls stuff on its own. And my advice is you always need that human in the loop. So it's just to be aware of that, because we see things online where, there will be a rise of disinformation, of misinformation, of people, I've seen it before like that. I can't even tell you the amount of hilarious moments I've had when I've blatantly seen someone's used ChatGPT and half the information is wrong or written in some strange kind of thing. And I'm like, we have to be encouraging more of, let's understand the limitations, and then let's introduce a human in the loop to say, how can we help mitigate that, but still get the best from it? And, just make peace with the fact that it will make up stuff, and it'll be confident in saying that. And your job as a human, which is why we're still needed, to anyone who asks the question, will I lose my job? Probably not, if you work in a base of a world of fact and data, because you're going to need to, as a human, to fact check that. And I think that's the biggest thing, is you can get what I call a great ugly first draft, but as a human, you've got to review it. You've got to fact check it. So just be aware of that when you're using this stuff and you're talking about AI solutions, because you don't want to be the company that, like I see at the moment, which is unfortunately getting popularity, where companies are building mental health tools and well-being tools with this technology. That worries me in the space of how these tools work. So, you don't want to be that company that does that and it ends up on the front page of BBC News or whatnot. So, get educated, and then you can make smarter decisions the more you know.
Very sage advice. Thank you. So I think you kind of saw what was coming back in the day. It got into all this stuff. What do you think are organizations not seeing when it comes to AI right now that might be
I think,
beneficial to them?
yeah, I honestly, I think it's really the bit we kind of discussed with the many use cases. I think people are obsessed with content creation, and I don't find that's changed for me really in the last 2 years, which worries me a little. However, I think that's because if social media and most mainstream media is our access to this stuff, and all
Mm,
they're talking about is that, that's all you're going to think it's about. But much like, when we had the discussion with the team, if you can understand that it can help you with data analysis, it can be a research assistant and build you case studies. It can also help as a thought partner. It can even help you build applications now as a coder. A lot of people don't see those sides of it. So they either dismiss it outright and say, oh, it's just a glorified, write my emails for me or summarize my meetings, which it does do. But again, going back to my Ferrari analogy, that's basically saying, okay, I'm just going to drive my Ferrari out of my garage and park it at the front of my house and do nothing else with it. Like, you've got this beautiful, powerful thing, but you only know how to do one thing with it, whereas actually
mm,
it's got this whole capacity. So there's huge opportunities, right? And I work with founders across Europe in particular, where we're looking at building processes that are powered by AI in as ethical way as you can. And the next level of this is how we move from assistants to AI agents, where, as an example, I'm a one-person business and I have a team of AI agents that runs part of my business, from basically conversing with customers or doing processes for me in the background. These tools can do that. It's just that we need to be showing that more. Like, there's people like me and others who, spending more time to say, here is the enormity of the possible. And I think there's so much untapped. So again, I would encourage people to go deeper than write my emails
mm.
or summarize my meeting, because you can do a lot. But again, my caveat to that is it has to work for your context. We're all different people doing different jobs.
Yeah.
And for some people, writing your emails and summarizing your meetings, that may be the thing that
Mhm.
that does it for you. For other people, it might be, how do we look at using ChatGPT to work as something like a Zapier to automate a process, but also to review that process and report back to a human. So I think it's really untapped, if I'm honest. And
Mm.
there is a great, what I call, maturity or scaling visual from Oliver Wyman, who did some huge research on this, where they have that most people are just an individual benefit. And then we're probably looking at, like with most tech, right? You're probably looking at 5 to 10 years until we get to a maturity level where we're starting to see the majority of people do these things that I'm talking about. I think now it's kind of like some little secret nerd club where there's like 10% of us doing it and everyone else is doing the other thing. But that, well, like most things, take social media as an example. Back in the day, 2005, if you said Facebook or Twitter, people were like, what are we talking about?
Mm.
Now it's a mainstream thing. So it will happen. There's just that maturity. So yeah, don't close yourself off just to content creation, because as I say, it would be sad to own that beautiful red Ferrari and not do anything with it really.
It certainly would. Certainly would. So last question, where can people learn more? And I know that you're probably too humble to plug yourself, so I will plug you myself because I think your content is awesome. So I know you've got the newsletter on Steal Your Thoughts that people can dive into, and
Mhm.
I know you've also got a crash course for specifically for people in L&D on AI, where to start.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's that many of those out there. So for our listeners, I would personally say they're really good places to start. But on top
Mhm.
of that,
Mm.
what else? What would you say, Ross?
Yeah, so on top of that is, and this was a plan, though, I would say this has just come from demand because people have been seeing me, what I can only presume they look at as magic tricks on LinkedIn from time to time it is. So I do now work with businesses on AI training. So if you are a business who's like, oh my God, I'm lost, I don't know what to do, and you would like to get a bit more confidence, you can contact me as well. I'll provide you with the website for that, of course. So I've ended up in the last year already working with 20 different companies as yourself in terms of helping them to get more confidence. So yeah, look, if you're in that space, and you want someone who is kind of there at the moment and having those conversations, and is definitely not what I would call a 9 to 5 suit out and out kind of guy, then yeah, you can come have a chat.
Cool. And any other sources? Anything else, like, you know, any other videos, content, LinkedIn Learning?
Yeah, I mean,
stuff?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is that so on LinkedIn, my schedule, to be honest, is my commitment is a video every week on a new thing to learn, and I've been able to keep that up for 18 months. It might spiral out. If you want to get the catalog of that, there is a YouTube channel for Still These Thoughts, which just acts like, I have no YouTube ambitions. It just acts as a back catalog for all the videos. So cool. If you know, I know social media is mad. So if you can't keep up with that, you go there. But yeah, I mean, I'd say the best thing is if you want to learn about these bits, as the company's called, you know, Still These Thoughts, I give it all away for free. So it's not like it's hard to see it. The videos are out there. The articles are out there in the newsletter, where I try and break down as much as possible. How can you do these things? And that's really the aim of why I started this whole mission and business, if you want to call it that, because it was to say, how do we take things in the industry that's not so good with tech and take the complex and make it simple? So I hope people get value from that.
I certainly think they do. And I think they will have got value from this conversation today. So thank you so much, Ross, for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. We hope you took some insight or inspiration from the conversation. If you did, please hit the subscribe or like button. And that's not because we want to get loads of sponsors. It's just so we know that you're finding the content worthwhile and we can keep delivering more and more conversations. If you are finding it useful, why not follow us on LinkedIn or check out our website or sign up for our newsletter to keep up to date with upcoming events, insights and articles to help either yourself or the leaders in your organisation. Thanks again.